And you are now live.
Okay, can I just remind that 3 of us have already been through the presentation and we plan to give you recommendations next Wednesday,
Okay,
just so you know.
all right. Well, then this shouldn't take too long because we already have the Cliff Notes from you. And
Yeah.
so Pat could go home early on a Friday afternoon.
Right.
So are we on, we're not online, or are we online now?
We are.
We are live.
Okay, so this is Senate Appropriations. We're continuing our work on the 2022 budget. And today we're taking testimony from the court administrator, Pat Gable, who's with us, and Greg Mosley, who's the, I guess, chief fiscal officer, I'm not sure, the lead fiscal person for the courts. And so I've just been reminded by Senator Sears that actually 3 members of this committee have already been the beneficiary of a presentation on the court's proposed budget. And so Senator Sears said, I don't need to pay any attention. I just need to listen to him.
That's not what I said.
Not what-
Well, I joined late, so I'll just have to weigh the testimony of both of you.
So welcome. And I'm going to let you, as you know, Pat, we don't get into all the details and the increases on, fee for space and all that, but we really, we know there are 2 pieces, one of which is your 22 budget. The other piece, which has been a topic of discussion, and that is getting what the reopening of the courts and our judicial system means, both in terms of the backlog of work and how you would manage it, and then the collateral impacts for state's attorneys and defender general staff. So I think we'll focus first on the budget proposal you have for this next fiscal year.
Okay, great. And I think I know that you like to, as you said, the Cliff's Notes version. And so I would like to invite Greg to present to you from, we do have a PowerPoint that we provided to you, but I think we could focus in for brevity on page 10 of the PowerPoint, which is a summary of the FY22 budget pressures.
Okay, it's the one up, the budget highlights.
It's part of the PowerPoint.
Would you
Okay.
like me to share the screen? Would you like me to put it up on the screen?
That would be good, I think. Greg, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Okay, great. And so if you go to page 10, I think we could start with that. We could give you a summary, and then we could go back into some other issues as we have time.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not this is,
Base.
well, let me ask, this is what you would like versus what the governor proposed?
So what we identified these items as items that were not covered in the governor's proposal. And these are the budget pressures that we presented to the governor, and he did not respond to the recommendation. The first item, which is the roll-up of the FY21 Pay Act, was included in the House version of the bill. And so we hope that the Senate will support the roll-up of the Pay Act, because I'm sure those of you who've been on the committee for a while know that now many years ago, when we weren't taking care of the roll-up of the Pay Act, it really did some damage to our ability to keep our expenditures within the budget. And perhaps Greg could talk about the other items in there that the governor did not propose, nor did the House address as well.
Sure, I can do that. Just a comment though on the governor's recommend. He did recommend a $100,000 increase for internal service funds, which go back to either ADS or BGS for fee for space or services that we get from the executive branch. But these upward pressures were not funded. Pat already mentioned the roll-up of the Pay Act that's now included in the House version. The reinstatement of the base general fund budget is a budget cut that we took last year for the good of the team. That was part of our, tightening our belt, the 3% reduction that was asked of all departments. Part of that give back was one-time carry forward funds at the end of last year, but our vacancy savings was adjusted by 500,000, and that's in our base budget. So that's going to be an every year give back unless that's reversed. The next item is $350,000 anticipated reduction in Title 4D revenue, and that's related to the child support program that we work with child support on. And as you probably remember, we're making adjustments to that, and we're expecting there to be a revenue decrease this year and next year, $350,000. The next one of $250,000, that takes a little explanation if you haven't already heard about it. The Labor Relations Board decided a case, and they have established a limit on the use of temporary employees. So
I've heard about it. You're talking about the GALs.
Yes, yeah. Some of those positions were part of this. There's actually 8 positions that were determined to have gone on for longer than 2 years, which is the new standard that we'll live by. But they asked that those 8 employees be transitioned over to limited service, and they're all part-time employees. But that's a $250,000 cost for those positions to put them into limited service.
And maybe I could just make a comment about that. Until the VLRB decision took place, we generally had our permanent positions, what you authorized for us. We every year use, temporary employees in certain ways. And in some positions, particularly in the GAL coordinator and security positions, some of those individuals prefer that model. They're usually retirees. And so it was a model where we were happy with it, the employees were happy with it, but the VLRB found that we had those people in those positions for too long a period of time. And so they want us to convert it to limited service. And we're still in the process of working through that, because normally limited service positions, as you know, are grant funded, or in some way there's funding already attached to them. In this case, the VLRB is telling us that we have to put them in that position, but we don't have funding. And that is the reason why the request is in our budget, which is to support the positions that they told us needed to convert.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick
Yes.
question?
Yes.
I was contacted by some guardians ad litem about the decision to advertise a position that would be in, I believe it was Caledonia County, and they were very much of the opinion that it should be in Chittenden County, but the ad was already in 7 days, I believe, and they were upset and believed that there would be caseload pressures would be much greater in Chittenden County, and were questioning that decision. I don't know if that's the coordinator or what position it was, but a position that was just advertised. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, yes. And so there were 2 coordinators, 2 GAL coordinators who were already retired and doing this work for us as temporary employees. And as I mentioned, they were fine with that. We were fine with that. The VLRB would not let us continue with those positions. And so we offered the limited service positions to the 2 retirees, and they chose not to accept those positions. As a result, we had to do what we normally do in the business process, and the manager in the division who's responsible for the GAL program had to, make the normal business decisions that they make. And not everyone who cares about the GAL program agreed with the business decision. And so that it's not uncommon for that to happen, because as this committee probably knows more than any, we don't have enough permanent positions in the judiciary to actually do everything we need to do. And that's part of the management challenge that we have, is we have to find ways to meet the goals and objectives, not just of our program, but also of the laws that require, GALs in certain kinds of cases. And so I would characterize that as a difference of opinion between people who are interested and care about the GAL program a lot, and the manager in the judiciary who is currently working on a different model. And I have to say, he's a wonderful person. He's very open to feedback and working with stakeholders. And so he'll continue to work with those people and continue to monitor the situation to make sure that what we do in the context of the positions we have still meets the needs of the GAL program as best we can.
And thank you for that. That was basically my response to these emails I got, was that, that decision had been made, position was advertised, but that we could monitor it going forward to make sure that their worst case scenarios. Yeah.
It seems like we had two things, one of which is the fact that the board said you can't continue that permanent, that temporary arrangement. But the issue you're bringing up is where the two coordinators are
Right.
cited within the system. Okay. Although.
And I agree that's
Yeah. Okay.
that's a business decision, which,
Mhm.
I and the other people who received those emails weren't in any position to second guess, but I do think it's important that we have an eye on it going forward. And
Yeah,
just
well,
make
there
sure-
was, Pat knows, and maybe others did. There, a lot of the GALs who are volunteers were very upset about the decision around these two individuals. They really regarded them very highly and felt that they hadn't been treated fairly or kindly. But it was a court of, it ultimately was driven by an appeal, because we know that VSEA monitors the use of temps very closely. And so what happened was the arrangement that worked for them as temps didn't work as limited service because of the impact it had on their retirement benefits. So that it added to greater complexity than even the citing. It was just why did this happen to people that really were so committed and so affected in their jobs, and having to make this kind of Hobson choice. So Pat's probably heard from a lot of people on that one.
Yes, and it's very important for people who might be watching the hearing today to understand that the guardians ad litem carry a tremendous heavy load because there are fewer of them than we would like, and they do transition. And I would say during the pandemic in particular, it's been very challenging to serve as guardians ad litem. So we really honor their service. We appreciate the work that they do. And you probably are aware, the Chief Justice in particular pays close attention to that program and the people who are volunteering. So I think we're all on the same page in terms of wanting the best outcomes possible. And we'll continue to try and manage our resources in a way that maximize those benefits.
Okay. Other questions on the GALs? That could be my next career.
That would be wonderful. You'd be tremendous.
Oh, good. But I was thinking of side judge, and that way I could have been in all three branches.
That's right.
So maybe
You'd
I'll
have
put
to
that up.
run for that.
Well, yeah, I'd have to run. That's true. Okay, we're on to tech fund.
Yeah, so we listed a $300,000 decrease in the revenue in our tech fund. That is a fund that we use for computer expenses for the judiciary. It is funded from civil violations and late fees from civil violations. That's been on a downward trend now for over 5 years. And I have an asterisk there because since we put together our budget a few months ago, we've been watching this very closely because this is tax offset season. And we were hoping for better news, but we're now projecting to be $550,000 under budget this year in the tech fund. And there is a slide later on that graphs out the last 6-7 years of that. This is a trend that's not going to go away. It's not because of the pandemic, although it could be worsened by the pandemic.
Senator Sears has his hand up.
Yeah, I
because-
believe that where does exactly the money come from to the tech fund?
Said civil violations and
Civil
fees.
violations, and we're talking about doing a study of the decrease in revenue for the Center for Crime Victim Services and a few others. Should we add you to the group?
Yes, please.
Yeah, because I think everyone is suffering, not just here, but I know in other places where you rely on fines and fees. They have, obviously during the pandemic, they're lower, but in many cases, we're not collecting the surcharges, et cetera.
Yeah, and if we could move to slide 12 temporarily from 10, you can see, there you go. And maybe
Oh, wow.
Greg, yeah. Greg, you could quickly explain that one.
Yeah, so this is compared to our budget. So that 0 is if we hit budget. So you can see the last 6 years we've been under budget. And the outlier year is FY19, where we almost hit our budget. The reason for that is because the Judicial Bureau transferred from the old DTAD system to the new Odyssey system, and we sent more debt over to the tax department than usual. Tax offset has become the primary collection tool now that people don't have to pay their underlying fees before they reestablish or get their licenses back. So this is a downward trend. If you take FY19 out of the picture, it's a very steep drop. And it's something that has to be addressed. We've been trying to pull expenses out of this tech fund and move them over to the general fund in our budget request for the past few years unsuccessfully. And so this is something that will have to be addressed along with many other agencies. If you were actually to go to the next slide, on slide 13, this is an analysis that was done a couple of years ago. It's actually FY18 data.
Chrissy, can you move to the next slide?
And you can see there from the pie chart how civil violations are divvied up among the different agencies. Again, I just want to point out this is FY18 data, so it's a bit dated, but you see that we've been measuring a foregone revenue of about $1.7 million annually since FY16. And we're a small part of it. Only 8% of civil violations go to the Judicial Bureau, although there's a small piece of it listed at the very bottom that are late fees. They're not actually the civil violations themselves, they're late fees that we tack on as the collection agency on that.
Well, you can see.
As we look at that study, it might be a good idea to keep this slide in mind, because as you see, it's not just the victims, Center for Crime Victims, it's the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Fund, the judiciary, and quite frankly, the towns and VTrans.
Mhm.
Yeah, and for us, it comes at a particularly difficult time because as we put together our funding package for all the technology, we had a very big capital appropriation that helped us go through the multi-year implementation of the case management system. But the tech fund has always been there as part of our funding for technology. It helped pay for backup positions in the judiciary, and it also pays for the software license fees for the purchase of hardware and the like. And so with that fund dropping dramatically, at the same time, we have these tremendous technology needs. It takes what was a very relatively stable track for us and creates uncertainties and difficulties.
Hmm. Thank you. That it really does. Senator Sears, your comment about if we're going to look at that whole issue of fees as revenue streams, this would be a comprehensive list, and because we were talking about
Yeah.
obviously crime victims.
Yeah, they're in, I mean, this doesn't include criminal surcharges, correct?
Now
this
it's
is-
civil.
This is just
It's all
Civil.
civil, but if you were to do a similar pie chart of criminal surcharges, et cetera, and then some people have 12 charges and they end up with 12 surcharges, and they're only able to pay one if at all. It would show, is there anybody on this list that doesn't receive money from the criminal surcharges?
I'd have to go back and look at that. There's a smaller list of people, or shorter list of people. So somebody's not getting criminal surcharges that is getting civil violations. I just don't know off the top of my head which ones.
Yeah, if you get, I mean, get back to me on that in the next few days,
Okay.
that would be helpful. Just what we're seeing in the loss of all those, where we've taken what might have been general fund expenses and put them off to civil violations and criminal violations, and then tried to fund programs, including the judiciary.
Right. Yeah, back when, the traffic tickets revenue was coming in,
Right,
that looked like a lovely pot of money, but of course, policies change over time and
right.
practices change.
I remember a time when the fine could equal the surcharge.
Right,
Hmm.
it's true.
All right. Well, was that language going in the budget, Dick?
Yeah, it came from Virginia Renfrew. I think I sent it to Stephanie, but I can try
You
to
sent
find
me
it
a
again.
copy, and so
Yeah.
what we would do is add.
Just adding to the scope of the study to look
Yeah.
at all of it rather than just the Center for Crime Victim Services.
Yeah. Okay.
So
It
if we
seems
want-
like. Sorry, I heard somebody start to speak.
Yeah, I thought we were moving on, but I'll wait until we're
Yeah.
done with this topic.
Well, I think we can. I can't see everybody's face on my little iPad. So we'll move on unless anyone has a question. All right. Are we going back or forward
could we
just
go-
like Chrissy? No.
Could we go back to slide 10 again, the same one we have been looking at? There we go. So the last two upward pressures listed here are security related. 2 security positions. For us, that would be contracted with the sheriffs. And then there's a sheriff increase in the rates. They've already started calling me and letting me know that at $29 an hour, they have a hard time recruiting and providing benefits for their staff.
Okay.
So overall,
So what's the good news?
Well, the good news is on the slide for, page 4, on page 3, where we talk a little bit about some of the things we've been doing already to transform the judicial branch. But you'll note if you look at slide 3, that almost all the funding there is either coming from a grant or we're seeking additional monies. And so when we do have the opportunity to make improvements and do transformation, it's not supported by the base budget of the judiciary. We always need to reach beyond that. And I think one of the most exciting things that we're working on, in addition to some of the responses that are in our pandemic response and recovery plan, is the Access and Resource Center, which will be both virtual and physical. And I've talked to this committee about that program before. We, historically, the judiciary was more of an inward-looking organization. We, clients would be represented by lawyers. They were kind of the interpreters for us, and we ran our cases, in a very traditional way. More and more, the people who interact with the judiciary do not have the benefit of being represented, although we would always prefer that they do, particularly in the civil docket. And so we've recognized the need to become a more externally oriented organization where we are providing direct services and information to people who may not have the opportunity to be represented by counsel. And so the initiatives that will be in the Access and Resource Center include supporting limited English proficient individuals, including possibly with video remote interpreting, new Americans by doing outreach, using the Access and Resource Center as an outreach to communities who may, from the places that they come, may not see the court system necessarily as a safe place for neutral resolution. But in other countries, the court system is often a part of the law enforcement side. And so finding a way to provide that cultural bridge. We anticipate partnering with Legal Aid, the Bar Association, and other organizations to provide either pro bono or low bono services, and especially to do a lot of internal and external education and support people who more and more will be interacting with the judiciary through technology. So that's a very exciting initiative. And it's too bad that Jane had to step away, because another one is we are shortly going to be receiving recommendations from the National Center for State Courts, who have been doing an evaluation of the child protection system in the context of the courts. And they have done a very good analysis, pointing out ways that in the court system and in the justice system generally, we could improve our practices to improve outcomes for children and families. And so we'll be receiving that report any day now. And we'll be sharing that with the committees of the legislature, and then starting to look at ways to look at the data they've developed and look at their recommendations, hopefully to deal with something that is by far the Supreme Court's top priority, which is the issue of children and families and child protection cases.
Pat, could I, Pat, raises, is that your dog, somebody's dog? I have a question, Pat. Have you provided testimony to any of the policy committees about the work that's been done in this particular area, in terms of the CHIN's work group and the judicial masters and so forth? Obviously, and then we have the report from the University of Vermont, which is supposed to be coming shortly, because members of this committee might, well, new ones wouldn't, but we did fund a study to be done by the University of Vermont to examine why Vermont is bringing more children into the custody of the state than other states by far. And you can say, well, it's poverty, but we're not the lowest poverty state. We're not the highest rate of drug abuse. And so all the things that, and then we think we're doing good investments with protection or services to children. But the question really is very much out there. What is it that is behind this rate of, and when children are removed from families and go through the judicial system, it's really a very, very difficult process. And that's why the masters were added. And so I was just wondering if you had any follow-up testimony, because it seems like people who are new coming in, all of a sudden, there's so many different ideas about how, sort of on an ad hoc basis, oh, this is the answer, or this is what we need to do. And right now, we're still kind of, in my mind, still in that phase of trying to understand and get a better grip on what exactly is at work, and what are those factors or influencing or influences that are resulting in Vermont children being removed from their family, their biological families, at much higher rates. So I was just wondering, have you been asked to go into policy committees to talk about, or maybe Judge Grierson?
So the Judge Gerson and other members of the CHIN's work group may have been testifying periodically. I think it's more likely that happened in between the sessions in some of the joint committees. But because this new report will probably be become public next week, that would be a great opportunity for us to come in once people have had a chance to absorb it. I think you'll find that it's a very rich data collection. It's a very candid report about where we could do better. And I do know that the researchers from the National Center have been in touch with the researchers at UVM. So there has been some communication on that. And so I think the combination of the UVM study, which mostly is looking at what happens prior to the time the petition is filed, and the National Center study, which is involved mostly, okay, a petition is filed, then what happens? Even the National Center study, I think, is going to be addressing what could be done at the pre-petition phase. So I think once we have these studies, there's going to be a tremendous opportunity for us to use that information and take another look at the system. And so even though, you know, there are hard truths contained in this study, the excitement for us is, after feeling for a long time, especially since the opioid epidemic has kind of, you know, exploded those child protection cases, that we're going to have some good data. You know, someone smarter than me once said that reliable data drives consensus. And I really do believe that. Everybody can have an opinion, but once your opinion is at least informed by data that everybody, you know, can agree on, I think that really helps us.
Oh, you mean anecdote doesn't drive policy?
I'm sure it does, but sometimes it's better to have data too.
No, I was being a little, well, I hope that between the two, and I knew that the researchers were kind of working together, and I'm hoping between the two studies, it can give us a better understanding. In the last draft at the university done by the University of Vermont, there was reference, I don't remember which national group, found that Vermont's investments in prevention were not as at the level that some other states. And so that raises a question: are we investing in the right activities? And that got into the home visiting pilot, and it changed the masters. So I'm really looking forward to these reports, because I think they could be so helpful. And for the members of the committee, in case you don't know, I've been a member of the Justice for Children Task Force since 2005, Pat.
That's before my time.
Oh, before your time. Which is under the auspices of the Chief Justice. And it brings together a representation from all the different parts of the system, including our probate judges, because in fact, a lot of child welfare and adoptions are being handled through probate court as well. And that comes with its limitations. So anyway, I guess we'll have some summer reading, and something that perhaps will be, I don't want to sound like Donald Rumsfeld, but actionable, or will help us make decisions around. But this becomes very hard when you try to redirect resources, because people would argue, I've been doing this, what I do is valuable, and people, you know, there's benefit to it, but it may not be the most strategic or the most, you know, the outcomes may not be as great. So that's always the challenge, is what are we doing and what should we be doing differently? And sometimes that does mean redirection.
Yes, and actually the discussion of this topic reminds me of one point I did want to make regarding our pandemic recovery plan. So the way we were we were able to fund this study because Senator Kitchell and Senator Sears led an effort to take certain monies, some one-time monies that came in, and to segregate them in a way that over a number of years, we would be able to make some improvements in this area. And so we've been very grateful for that because it's allowed a little bit more planning and experimentation than is normally permitted. The only downside of the way that that money is segregated right now is that it still requires the legislature each year to, in a way, permit the spending of the money. And so what happens is when we're trying to do a plan over a certain short number of years, there is a certain amount of delay that comes while we wait for that. And I understand why with the CHIN's work group, it was done that way. You'll note that in the proposal we have for pandemic response and recovery, we're proposing one-time monies be appropriated to us, but to be used over 3.5 years. And my hope would be in that case, if the committee were to grant our request to appropriate these funds to us to support that plan, that we be given the flexibility to spend those monies over that period of time and coming back and reporting to the relevant committees, certainly every year, about how we've done on our plan and what we've learned and the like, but without the need to come back and ask the permission to spend the next piece. That enables us to be more nimble, at the same time still being accountable to the legislative committees. And so I know that there may be some different ideas you'll be considering, but I would ask you to consider that if it's possible.
Senator Kitchell?
Yes, yes, certainly.
Hi, Pat. Nice to see
Nice
you.
to see you, Senator Bell.
Sorry, I was a little bit late to committee, so I apologize if you already covered this, but I was curious, as someone who served on judicial rules for the last few sessions, I know the issue of pro se litigants has come up quite a bit, and you touched on that. I'm just wondering, are you anticipating a surge of pro se litigants coming out of the pandemic? I know you're already dealing with a backlog of cases. I'm just wondering, how does that piece of the puzzle factor into what you're anticipating the needs of the courts being as we come out of this?
Okay, so the question is then the startup plan that you presented to us for the next 3 years.
Yes.
Is that
In the issue.
included, reflected, or incorporated in the plan? Is that the question?
That's exactly right. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, yes. And, as you know, Senator Ballant, most of the people who deal with the judiciary already are not represented by counsel. And the areas in particular that we expect to see surges after the moratoria on evictions and foreclosures come to an end are in those very areas, in those civil dockets, where, unlike the criminal dockets, where at least there's legal protections that people can be represented. It's in the civil dockets where we have the biggest gap between the needs of litigants and the knowledge of the law and court systems. And so we are addressing that in a number of ways. One is that we have, and I did mention this a little bit before you came on, we have an Access and Resource Center program that we will be developing, not just in person, where when they can be in person, they will be in person, but also supporting people with online and with technology. And as many legislators are aware, not everybody in Vermont has access to broadband, or has, myself, I don't have access to reliable internet at home. I'm here in my office. And also, or they might not have the hardware they need. And so as we anticipate the restart of jury trials, for example, we are going to be experimenting, and this is Associate Justice Carroll is actually leading an initiative right now to evaluate two things. One is, to what extent can we do jury trials remotely? And the real issue there really does depend on the extent to which we can support individuals, in this case, prospective jurors who can have access. And even if in the long run, we decide that remote jury trial is not the norm, there is a lot of reason to believe that the preliminary aspects of the jury trial, where we do voir dire and evaluation, could be successfully done remotely if individuals had access to the hardware and the internet they need. So our whole program, when people have a chance to look at the plan, is to really focus on surging resources in those areas where we expect a temporary surge and down. We've built in, through vacancy savings, the expectation that we will surge the number of people who are working for us, limited service positions, but then we also phase them down so that we don't hit a resource cliff at the end of the period of time. And we really do focus on what we think is the future of the judiciary, which is making sure that we, even when we have in-person proceedings, and as everyone knows, in-person proceedings are still a very important part of access to justice, but we're able to use technologies to make us more efficient and effective in that. And that particularly, the combination of our next generation case management system technology and the new remote technologies that we were able to put in place mean that even in those parts of the state where we have maybe not as many lawyers as we used to, more and more lawyers now can really serve all parts of the state, because as their use of technology partners with ours, we'll be able to bring access to justice. And because fewer people will have to drive from one building to the other, whether in good weather or bad, we'll be able to improve the processing of cases. And so the pandemic has been a terrible thing, but there is a silver lining, I think.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay, we obviously are interested in much broader than just the figures, because so much of what an appropriation is understanding the issues and the work and the policies. So you can see our interests are fairly broad, and we're relying on.
May I mention, Senator Kitchell, that even though in this hearing we don't have much time, we have provided all the information that we normally do, which should be accessible to you online, which is not only the financial information, but we do a complete program report, including the results-based accountability measures. And we also identify the various areas that are exceptional in terms of where we might have particular backlogs or particular issues. And so we're always happy to answer questions either back in another meeting or individual questions of legislators on that.
Or I can talk to Judge Bent in the aisle of the Price Chopper in St. J.
You could, or you can, I spent a grueling hour and a half with Greg and Pat Gable on the budget.
That wasn't our personalities.
No, it was, it was grueling though. I mean,
Yeah, it was.
The problems that the judiciary is facing, both as a result of the pandemic and a result of the natural overload in the system, even pre-pandemic, is enormous. And the resources have not been there that they really need. And it's partly our fault, but also partly the administration's fault. And I don't think.
Well, we're going to have our challenges because.
Right, and when we're adding to the base,
Yeah.
it becomes even more difficult. And I've got a few ideas, but
Well, the other thing.
I don't want to interrupt the presentation, but I would say that part of the challenge here is that our base is shrinking at a time, when we have, and they have actually a very good plan at I think, eliminating a lot of their backlog, which would help us to control general fund down the road increases.
Well, maybe this is an opportunity we have with the one-time funding is what you're saying is to do this.
Well,
Um,
to try to eliminate some of the backlog, I
Yeah,
realize it's an $11 million proposal, which is not,
Well,
cheap. But in terms of, sending out over $3 billion to business, I think it isn't really that much. And you hear it with that.
that is true, and that's one of the challenges of being on the Appropriations Committee is to balance out all the what we see as the competing needs for funding. And what Senator Sears is referencing is that the ARPA money, which would be a logical funding stream as a result of COVID, this built up backlog, to be the funding support for this multi-year plan to get the judiciary backlog caught up and the system stabilized. The proposal that we have from the administration does not include anything to do that. So if we say this is a compelling need, and I would argue we are hearing some very, very sympathetic situations from constituents regarding the whole area of evictions and foreclosures and elderly people who can't sell their homes because the tenants won't let them in to show the property, and other people are feeling on the other side. But the whole moratorium in that area has really brought a lot of difficult situations kind of to our attention. So anything we do is trying to think about not only the workload, but how do we use this as an opportunity, as Senator Sears is saying, that when we're done here, we're in a better place and we are able to actually influence the cost and that fiscal pressure. The other part, I would say, with the plan, there are certain things that might, in fact, there's another pot of ARPA money for capital, and some of the, for remote and whatever. So there may, in fact, be opportunities to look at parts of your plan and different, depending on the nature of the expenditure, match it with a more defined or more limited source of the ARPA money that has to be used in more directed ways than this more flexible money that we have as well.
Yes, and if I may just interrupt to say, and those of you who are on Senate Judiciary already know this, this plan has been focusing mostly on operating funds, but there is a whole other multi-million-dollar need regarding courthouse improvements, which we've anticipated would be handled in some way in the capital portion of ARPA monies if the legislature so desires. And that includes certain amounts of money for county courthouses. I know there is a place in ARPA that does focus on county government. So, and I think, Greg, am I right that our guesstimates, we had very rough estimates when we were able to look at this, but it exceeded $10 million, I think, in terms of courthouse improvements that would be required.
I think that might be complicated because we've heard the county money is going out to municipalities.
Oh, well, that would be a shame.
Well, it does mean that whether it's the sheriffs or waste districts or the courthouse, just like the side judges put together a county budget, there's ways that could say, wait a minute, all the money flowed there, but there's this other level of government that serves towns. And so that's why we're hoping the RPCs can help maybe aggregate funding for those county needs if all the money ends up going out to municipalities directly.
A lot of it is for air quality in the county courthouses.
Right. Yeah, there are county courthouses where we can no longer hold jury trials. And as you know, there are some counties that only have one courthouse, which is the county courthouse.
Mhm.
So our goal, we have an active plan, and we're working on it now, is we're reopening courthouses as the appropriate ventilation standards are implemented. And so it's only in those counties where some of them have no ventilation systems at all because the buildings are so old. Some of them do have ventilation systems but are inadequate. And so the extent to which there's a timeline to make improvements helps make more county courthouses accessible again. And by the way, it isn't just county courthouses. There are at least 2 state courthouses that can't be used yet until additional improvements are made as well.
We're kind of off on the budget. In terms of vacancies, judicial vacancies, we've gone through. Are you, sometimes you've had numerous vacancies, but are you pretty well filled with those positions filled at this point, or?
So that we had, at the beginning of your legislative session, we had one vacancy that needed to be filled, which was a vacancy created when Justice Cohen was elevated to the Supreme Court. And that is at the status right now where I think the governor is reviewing candidates that have been sent to him by the Judicial Nominating Board. But we've also had 2 retirements. And so 2 trial judges have retired this spring, and that creates new vacancies. And as you know, we normally use judge vacancies as a component of the way we manage vacancy savings in our normal budget process. In light of what we're facing, we're hoping that we won't be put in a position of having to keep judge vacancies, because we think we're going to need all the judges that we can get. And so we haven't really had a chance yet to speak with the governor's office about those 2 vacancies, but they're coming up pretty quick. And as I said, I'm the guardian of the budget, and I'm supposed to be the one saying, no, don't fill those yet. But really, based on what we're facing, I hope we won't be put in a position where that's one of the places we have to find vacancy savings. And that's part of the issue with dropping our base budget. Because we did that when we were expecting all the fiscal issues to be much more challenging than they turned out to be. We did it, as Greg said, to kind of play our role. But really, we could not withstand a cut in the base. And what I hope is that will be restored. So that it's kind of a weird disconnect. And I know you have that too, where we have the ARPA funds and the ability and for the legislature and the governor to make some, interesting choices there. But then we also have to take care of our base budget, because as those one-time funds come and go, that's what we can really rely on in the long run.
Oh, I know, we're obsessed. It's all about the base, Pat. Senator Starr.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, during this pandemic, Pat, how much money have you saved by not having the courts opened and having to work every day? Have you saved some expense?
So the courts have never been closed, even in the darkest hours a year ago. But we did save certain kinds of monies. And so we've always been open. And so we haven't saved payroll. I mean, that's always been what it's been. And I think, as you know, that's the largest part of our base. But the kind of monies we did save that contributed to some of the one-time savings that enabled us to use one-time monies to sort of bridge gaps is that travel expenses are reduced. As you know, we have judges who rotate. And so there's a reduction in travel expenses. There's recently, because of the VLRB decision, where we have to look more carefully at temporary employees, we looked at our security costs. And so in those buildings where we normally have many, many people coming through the doors every day, we have fewer people coming in. So we've been able to make some savings in those areas. But in the areas where we, have the biggest commitment for our base, which is payroll, we haven't really saved money there. Greg, did I miss anything, in terms of savings or?
No, I just would point to that PowerPoint. If they want to go back and look, slide number 8 has a pie chart of our budget. And obviously 72% of our budget is salaries, and we didn't save any money on salaries. Another 14% is internal service funds, and there was no reduction there. And then there was this, yeah, that's the slide. And then there was security. So everything else accounts for just 8% of our budget, and that's where other savings might accrue. We mentioned travel, out-of-state travel and training. We're saving some money there, but it adds up to nickels and dimes in the big picture.
So it did create more one-time funding. And so we are, doing our best to take advantage of whatever one-time funding we have to deal with what we're dealing with.
But see, a lot of places, of course, saved money, because if they weren't busy, they laid people off. But of course, you can't do that, I guess, if they're state employees. But I know a lot of businesses saved money during the pandemic, and so I was just wondering, if you did save any and where it was. Like, the sheriffs, you didn't need kicking around and things. I went to the courthouse a couple of times last fall just to go in to deliver my petition papers, my candidate papers, and couldn't find a soul in there except for the guy that let me through he didn't even let me through. He made me put my papers in a box out by the door. And so I know there wasn't anybody there working, and just that it's not too good when you have to pay somebody to stay home. That's all I guess I'm saying.
So Senator, I don't want you to think because the courthouse doors were closed that there was no one working, because the court system was open every day, both where we could do remote proceedings. There would be people in the building supporting remote proceedings, but also we always were open to emergency in-person proceedings. And so if someone was there for an emergency proceeding and they were able to respond positively to the health questions, we would admit them and they would do what they had to do in the courthouse. And I would also say, once we were able to roll out the COVID money that enabled us to get remote proceedings up, we were able to send employees home with their laptops. And in those counties that had already been rolled out to Odyssey, they were able to continue to docket cases, even if they were working remotely. And so we have a pod system that we've had in place where a group of employees work remotely one period of time, and then they come in and they work, in the courthouse. But we have continued to process cases all along, though not at the pace that we would like, because I think you know as much as anybody that when we do these meetings in this remote fashion, everything takes longer. It's very linear, and it's not the same as people doing a lot of stuff all at the same time, in the courthouse. And so things are much slower. That's part of the backup. But
I suspect Senator Starr was referring to the county courthouse. That may have been indifferent than if he had gone to the district court. And I don't know if there's two different. In my district, we had to go to the county court on South Street in Bennington rather than the district court to file our papers.
Well, it might be a bit like going to the State House right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, same idea.
So you had to hand them in a box. They took them and then they sent us a notice that they had received them, but you couldn't have that. Usually you just go up, before the pandemic, you'd go in, hand them in, they'd stamp it and say, thank you very much. And then you'd go. This time you had to give them remotely, not remotely, but you were handing them to the person.
I just wanted to make sure, I didn't want to leave the misimpression that people in the judiciary weren't working, because I'm sure just as you
No,
find,
I
if
think
you've, yeah, if you've been on Zoom all day, you're exhausted. So,
it's
a lot of
worse. Personally, I think it's worse being on Zoom all day than it is.
Oh, it is.
Can I ask one?
You
budget
may,
question?
Senator Sears.
Thank you.
We're counting on you.
When we were talking about the VLRB, when we met individually, you said it was 125,000. I crossed out in my notes the 250,000. And is it 125 or is it back to 250?
So 250 is the amount of the positions. And so if we can no longer use the temporary position, or we need to fill that position with a limited service employee, then it's the 250. The reason we said 125 is because, as we mentioned, people who are already retirees didn't accept the jobs. And so therefore, we have to find other ways to fill that gap. And so the short-term issue is that, with those particular individuals that, dropped it by half, but one way or the other, we have to put people in place. And so the 250 is really the position capacity, not the actual.
So the 250 is the gap between what was the pay or the cost of the positions as
the 8 positions.
temps versus limited service.
There were 8 positions that they identified had been there and Greg knows that it's 2 years and what is it, 25% or something.
I just wanted to know, we're talking about the incremental costs.
Right.
The other issue is court security, and that was 2 positions in Barry. And then the sheriff's increase, and I still, we have a mess because you have to negotiate 14 different contracts. And we need to straighten that out. It's ridiculous.
Well, we've talked about that before, Senator Sears.
Yeah, I know. And we never we don't have the courage or the money, whichever it might be.
Probably the latter.
Maybe. I might propose this year that we have all security contracted through the Department of State Attorneys and Sheriffs with one contract.
Yeah.
You have situations like in Windham County, with all due respect to my good friend from Windham County, where your security is private and does not have a person who can arrest somebody, and they come to the court to turn themselves in and they can't get arrested.
That's literally.
I want to get arrested. You've probably seen that movie. The guy comes in and says, "I want to be arrested." Andy Griffith, in Mayberry arrests him. I think it was Otis. Puts him in the cell. Well, in Windham County, they can't because they have to send him down the road.
Well, this has been a kind of a perennial conversation.
I think unless we actually do this, we're not going to get the services that the state deserves.
Well, does this tie into the other issue around the?
Well, the other issue
transport?
regarding per diem of transports,
Right.
that's the one thing that is going down is the number of transports. And I think it will continue as we continue to do remote arraignments and other more routine things by video rather than in person. And I think the transports will go down. I think that should also be negotiated in one place, whether it be put out to bid or 2 sheriffs do it, one in the north, one in the south, whatever. I think it's time to take those state paid deputies.
Well, my question would be, we've talked about it. Is your plan that we would use the budget this year to do that?
To do a per diem and also use some of the savings to try to booster courthouse security through one negotiation through the Department of Sheriffs, Department of State Attorneys and Sheriffs. Campbell may be going bonkers right now when I mention this publicly. I just,
Greg Mosley is responsible for our security contract. So he's your subject matter expert in the judiciary, and Rob Shell, who is our security manager. The two of them actually manage the security issues.
well, the per diem issue with the sheriff's for transport is one that I've spent some time talking with a couple of sheriffs about, who do a lot of them. And they feel that in some places, I mean, you've got one rate for the sheriffs who are transporting a DCF client, one rate for a court transport, and one rate for mental health transport, one rate for other types of.
So, and just the kids in FSD and in DCF are the kids that they're trying to do the statewide contract for.
It's
Right,
not the
because-
childcare.
It
No,
is childcare, but it's both.
Yeah, because that's part of their problem with DCF is getting sheriffs. I know this isn't part of the judiciary budget, but
Right.
there's an opening, say, in Bennington at 206 Depot for a kid, but they can't find a sheriff to transport. So either the kid stays in the police station or is housed in a motel with a couple of social workers, which is where the assault occurred back a few months ago.
I don't know. It seems like the transport needs of kids to childcare versus a 15-year-old to one of the Bennington residential programs represents very different.
I think it does, but I'm glad Richie answered that because that's the
Yep.
exact problem
is.
we've been trying to approach. And it's the same. And because the sheriffs can't find somebody to transport because they've been working on, traffic duty.
Well, we've got a lot of things to solve or at least get started between now and a week from today. I just want to get back to the budget. Obviously, we've got 3 members of judiciary. This has been a section of the budget that Senator Sears has been assigned to for many years. So we rely on his in-depth knowledge of the budget and the pressures. And I'm just wondering in terms of other information or questions that we have of Pat or Greg.
Good.
Anything else?
I have,
Yes, Greg.
if you want to go back to that criminal surcharge question that was unanswered earlier about who gets the criminal surcharge, I do now have that information, or I could send it to you by email.
Okay, well, if you've got it to put up, you mean in terms of posting?
Yeah, so there's only 3 entities that get money from the criminal surcharge: the Victims Compensation Special Fund, and then the Domestic and Sexual Violence Special Fund, and then the remaining goes to the general fund. So judiciary doesn't get any, and neither do the other ones that get some of those civil violation fees.
Stephanie's working. I just sent Stephanie the information from Virginia Renfrew on that study that was simply stuck for the Center for Crime Victims, but I think it should be expanded.
Okay, all right, we'll do that. We'll add that. I think we agreed that it was, as long as we're looking at that issue, we should make it comprehensive and include the fees that are going to the court, because that obviously, the chart's pretty graphic in terms of what the loss has been or the reductions have been. Other questions for this afternoon? I don't know if you're lucky or unfortunate to be here on a Friday afternoon, but appreciate your coming in. And
Yeah, we're grateful for your interest and your understanding of all these issues. They interweave, they're interconnected, they're very complex.
well, my favorite quote is John Muir, who said, "Everything is hitched to everything else." And I think when you sit on the budget committee, it really brings that home. So appreciate everything, and thank you for coming in today.
Great. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
committee members.
So committee, it's 2:15. Stephanie, we thought maybe we would try to, we're going to end, not try, we will end at 3, but we wanted to walk through some more language. And since Senator Sears doesn't have to drive home, I don't know what it's like in Bennington, but we've got about 6 inches of snow up here in Danville.
Well,
Yeah,
I
snowing
it's-
good in
I hate to
Troy.
tell you, in Bennington, it's all been rain.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of snow this morning around 6 a.m. when I went out to get the paper, and it snowed till about 8. Then it started raining and all the snow is gone.
I was just
We're
worried
back
about
to,
Becca.
we're back
having
to springtime, so Becca has to drive to Brattleboro. I think she's gonna run into some snow and
I think in
find
the
the
valleys
greens.
it's good. I think in the valleys it's actually good.
Well,
Yeah, but you have to
luckily,
go that interstate through Randolph.
Yeah,
the
and
Brookfield
Heights-
part.
Brookfield, yeah, which tends to be sometimes treacherous.
Yeah.
And down through Sharon.
Well,
So-
luckily, I don't tend to take my studs off till 4th of July, so we're all good.
well, my appointment was this morning, and so luckily my son took the car down to get the tires taken off, and I said, "You'll get there. I don't know if you're gonna get back."
I'm glad mine aren't off. We have now about at least 10 inches now, maybe
Yeah.
more.
Wow.
Heavy,
Um,
heavy.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about it, although it's kind of is hard to take, is that we need moisture so badly.
We need
My
water.
I couldn't believe it. So I actually got my peas in last weekend. That's pretty early for Danville. And the soil is very dry. So I think farmers would be very happy, and we just need, after such a dry summer and not much snowfall this winter.
Well, growing up, what all the old farmers called snow in the spring, poor man's fertilizer.
Yeah, poor man's manure. what we would-
It made your green grass look greener.
Yeah, that's right. Poor man's manure, we called it.
Yeah, I'm
So,
gonna have to go out and mow this week.
So Stephanie, are you ready to try
Sure.
to whip us into?
So where you left off yesterday, if people
Yeah, I ran
open up
out
their,
of, Chrissy, did you send it? Oh, you've got it. Thank you.
the PDF.
So
for-
what page were we
House
on?
Pass bill.
148.
You're at the bottom of page 152.
Oh, well,
152, you're at the bottom of.
You see, I ran out of
Section
printer
E,
paper at
324.
150. Sometime I've got to do an expensive account.
me too.
Alice and I haven't even managed to do it
Right.
since ever.
Well,
You're
take
supposed
it
to-
off, at least take a credit on your income tax.
Can we still do it?
No, I think you can
Take
still
a
do it.
credit on your income tax for expense, well, sure.
Oh, I thought it was just all income.
The 70, that
Yeah,
is,
but you aren't taking it as, you aren't even claiming it. You just got an expense. You can deduct an expense.
yeah, an
I
expense.
could.
What
All
what
right.
page are we on?
We're on
You're
about
on- you're-
152 of 3.
Yeah, you're on the bottom of page 152, section E 324, expedited crisis fuel assistance.
How do we get that far?
Yes, that's right where we left off.
We went over the working group already?
Yes, we did.
Good.
Because we actually acknowledged the fact that the Agency of Human Services couldn't wait for the budget to be passed to get moving on this. So they actually have a working group that includes legal aid, folks from mental health. It's being chaired by Mike Smith, Secretary of the agency. So that work is currently underway, and the only question, and then we looked at it in terms of their first interim reports, April 30th, but the work continues beyond
Well,
that. So
yeah, the work continues beyond that. And what they told me this morning was that group hopes to have a recommendation to us by Tuesday.
all right, that relates to the budget.
that would, well, anything they do is going to relate to the budget on this. So they hope to have a recommendation. Well, they said early next week, and I'm hoping Monday, but
All right, well, because it has until November 30th to submit the final plan. So I'm not sure whether they're talking about policy changes or they're talking about, funding, but
Here's
well, as I've said to you before, they hope to have a recommendation the first of the week.
So here's
Okay.
all the stuff that Debbie Engram's group wanted.
I'm sorry, what?
There's all the stuff listed here in the previous one about the
Yeah.
working group, about what they're all going to do, converting lodging establishments and all of that is also.
I'm sorry, I can't find the,
So we're just setting that aside until the work group comes because we may want to redo that section.
Absolutely.
That was put in there. I'm just saying that don't worry, even though we haven't acted on the budget. There's a group that has been meeting to really undertake the planning and figure out the transition. The one thing that I mentioned yesterday is that funding will continue. We have two big pots of federal money. One is that 200 million for rental assistance, and then there's another, is it 153?
152, yeah.
152. Oh, I was off a figure, a digit.
what page are we on? I'm sorry.
Well, we're talking about emergency housing, but we're on 152, bottom of 152.
Thank you.
So my only point is we continue to have federal dollars available to help us with the emergency housing need, so that we can, because obviously a lot of this housing is not going to come online the beginning of July. So fortunately, we've got significant federal funding still available that can be used for hotels and motels or other emergency housing needs. So
And
we're going to move on.
With that, I have to say that what they're saying to me is they're losing so many hotels and motels and rooms that no matter what we have for money, they don't have the space. So I just have to say that.
I think we acknowledge that, and that's going to be the challenge. There are examples of how alternate emergency housing can be provided. FEMA's got all kinds of models.
And that is a piece of what they're talking about in that group. And that's what is going to come to us next week.
So let's go on to expedited crisis fuel assistance.
This is the language that's in every year that allows the payments to be done expedited if they're about to run out of fuel. It does count against the total one grant for crisis fuel, but it's in every year to grant that authority.
All right, we'll keep that again.
On to the next page in 325. This specifies the amount of money that's going out to the homeless shelters in the base budget.
Okay, is that a different than it has been before?
I don't know what it was last year. I'll check.
Okay. Do you know, Rich? Section?
I think that from the House's point of view, they went back, and I think it is, but I'm not exactly sure. What I don't know is whether the homeless shelters in an interim plan, whether or not they'll have some recommendation for change there, but I'm not expecting it.
All right, well,
So this 6 million isn't for shelter?
It's the base money for shelter.
For the shelters.
For two?
No, it's more than two.
What did you say?
Oh, it's more than two. we can get some more information on that.
I'll get you some background about how
That would be
many.
helpful because it's more efficient to do it that way.
Yep.
The other E326, that's standard to allow a certain amount of the
Weatherization, yeah,
weatherization to be used for, so if somebody's furnace has to
be replaced, yeah.
Yep.
be repaired or whatever. Repeal, that's the Woodside piece, and that's repealed. 335, corrections unexpended, justice reinvestment.
Yeah, we set this up. So there's been the
This is
ability
our
to transfer at the end of the year between out-of-state beds and the regular correctional services appropriation. This allows the transfers out of correctional services if there's money there. What it does is hold any balance, and this would be at the end of 22. There's existing language for the end of 21 in Act 154 that we passed in the fall. Any money that would be remaining in the out-of-state bed line can't be transferred. It has to be held for justice reinvestment to one-time investments.
Yeah, and that's really important. We wanted to put a fence around that. Senator Sears, we talked about that last, and so that's keeping that practice that if there are savings, then they are protected or fenced around for reinvestment purposes. Okay, 335.1, this is the body camera.
This is language that the House included on deployment of body cameras.
Why does it say
Yeah,
correctional officers, body worn cameras, police and deployment?
I think it's supposed to say policy. That's a typo in the title.
Okay, I was just wondering, it seems like it's not the right word.
no.
Okay,
Because part B is the policy development, and I think that's why it's supposed to be policy.
okay, all right, well, it just doesn't,
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
wrong
all
word.
wrong word. All right, Senator Sears, this is,
I didn't get any complaints from the commissioner on it.
okay.
I can remember.
It seems like it's pretty consistent with our other language about you don't deploy until you have a policy and training and you have storage. And in other words, you've got the system set up.
Yep.
And it has reporting and funding, keep, understanding what the funding requirements for.
But there's no time limit on how long they have to set this up, Dick?
It says they shall provide a progress report to the Justice Oversight Committee by September 15th.
Like 21.
Progress report, but no timetable, like 1 year, 2 years, definite.
No, they got the funding report is also on September 15th. So I'm assuming that they're, and then they have on the status February 15th, 2022. So it's a good point, Bobby. It doesn't actually say that they have to do it.
Well, maybe we could let the process go and assume that they will do
Yeah.
it. And if they don't, then we will know because.
Well, this is something they want to do, so I'm assuming they're going to do
And
it.
it says on or before January 15th, they will present to the judiciary institutions, et cetera, about the use. And so if they're not doing it or there's a problem, there are plenty of benchmarks there or, triggers to set a deadline.
We can fix it next winter if they don't come around.
Yep.
It says funding, the department shall cost and funding source for the use. Is that, I don't.
And the only funding source is generally going to be general fund because that's really the only source available to the department. Things, but.
And did we fund them?
You did. Well, you have $1 million in the one-time section for the actual equipment.
Yeah.
The cost that was recommended by the governor. The cost of the storage, et cetera, I think at this point is expected to be absorbed into their budget. Because the
Okay.
costs have lowered over time.
All right.
We'll find
All
out
right.
in budget adjustment or in the FY23 if there needs to be some incremental adjustment to the base.
Yeah,
for that.
okay. Number E337, this is Community High School of Vermont. This is the 2-year funding.
Out of the ESSER funds. The agency does not care for this funding source being used.
They wanted to get it probably out of the general fund, didn't they?
No.
The governor
Ed
put it
fund.
into the ed fund and the House put it into the ESSER funds.
We can fight over it, but we'll lose.
You know, you're right. We've got so many battles, Dick.
Yeah.
This gives 2 years to have the fight
Yeah.
again.
Yeah,
But the Agency of Education does not like this.
Yeah,
well, they don't like anything, so that's, they're right, ball game.
We shouldn't have the fight, but it is an ed fund expense.
It is absolutely an ed fund expense, but we could put that fight off for 2 years. Or you could put a line in that after 2 years, the funding will revert to the education fund.
Well, we want to do something with the OPEB in education this year, so maybe we won't.
Well, it'd be a nice little line for them to read. They might miss it.
Can we use small type?
Yeah, you think so?
really.
So I think we're going to go with this for
Yeah.
now because our choices are so limited.
Go
And
for it.
And
is
we've
this
got
out
bigger
of the,
fish.
This is out of the ESSER 2 money, and so we'll.
is that the 9.2
Yes,
out of the 12, whatever it was? We spent 3.6. This is the 9 point. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we will close that out, even though, and because we do believe it is a legitimate educational expense, it's just coming out of the federal ESSER money rather than state ed fund for now. This is Correctional Services. Oh my goodness, Newport and Springfield got a special payment.
Yeah, this is pork for Star and Nitka.
Uh-huh.
Oh, Alice, we got some pork coming our way.
This is community-friendly jails.
I thought we closed the jail in Springfield.
Are you kidding?
No.
No.
No, we bought the
That was
whole town of
Woodstock.
Springfield.
Oh, it's Woodstock.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Spring-
Woodstock. Okay.
Allison Clarkson got that out. She no longer gets the pilot funds.
Yeah,
Well,
this deal's been going on for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yes,
Yeah,
it has.
yeah.
agreement
It has.
when Springfield accepted the correctional center. There were a lot of agreements there that, whew,
Oh my gosh, we rebuilt the road.
the
Edgar
road.
May, talk about,
We did the whole town.
yeah,
Yeah.
somebody
I
said
know.
we just about bought the town of Springfield, but
Yeah.
Well, we
Um,
did. But it's not funny. The reason there's no correctional industry there and no work there is because they spent the money on the road that was supposed to go to the correctional industry. So
it
it's
raises,
literally, the space is there. There's a cement platform for to put the industry in so that the inmates would have some work to do. But they put the money into the road. We've never gone back and said, let's, in the capital bill, let's build a facility so they can, make license plates or furniture or whatever.
Dick, I was wondering, at some point, is there, I don't know, we've got correctional industry, we've got the Community High School of Vermont. There's been greater emphasis on skills or trade or applied learning.
Yeah.
Is there a marriage there that we should look at?
There should be. There
Yes.
really should be, because,
Yeah.
the best, and it's fairly true. The best crime prevention thing is a job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it's
So
You
I
mean
just,
move from one from the high school to the vocational, like a
Yeah,
vocational?
maybe vocational or, maybe we should,
It was more like it's almost like saying a career and technical education approach, a tech ed.
I believe it's when they had the women housed in,
Windsor.
No.
actually in St.
Rutland?
Albans. It
Oh,
was actually a motorcycle. A woman
Oh,
learned
repair.
motorcycle mechanics and repair and got a good job repairing motorcycles when she got out.
Was Vermont Works for Women involved in that?
I don't remember, Alice.
I mean,
It was
and
so long ago.
in Windsor, when the women were there, I mean, they had become quite professional at running the sign shop, which includes the license plates
Yeah.
and all the road signs. I mean, they had women there who had accumulated quite a bit of money and were in supervisory roles and everything else. They ran the whole thing. And it was great in terms of people having to show up for work, get along with your coworkers. And people say, oh, they don't need to learn how to do license plate. What they learned how to do was to work and get along with
Yeah.
their coworkers, get there on time, do the job.
Yep.
well,
What the work
that ties into the proposal we have, which we haven't really talked about yet, but workforce development, it's a proposal of the Coalition of Vermont Works for Women, Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, Resource, I think it is. And it really is it's to serve youth in the summer with those very work opportunities where they have supervision and they have mentoring and they have the ability to really hands-on. So I think the value of those kinds of programs are really so important to so many kids that might not necessarily want to take the CCV course, but really could benefit from those kinds of work opportunities and adult mentoring, which unfortunately so many of the youth don't necessarily have it,
Right.
in their homes. So, but we're off license plates now and back to E500, which is education, finance, and administration.
Gonna teach the third graders how to read now.
We're doing away with that entire agency.
Oh, this is
This is global commitment used for the medical necessity of IEPs.
Yeah, okay.
And we always link the global, when we appropriate global commitment outside of the agency, we link it to its purpose. And
When is that report coming on Vermont's overuse of IEPs as compared to other states?
Oh, we did have a report
Yeah.
back when Rebecca Holcomb was there
That
that
was-
really concluded that Vermont's over-reliance on paraeducators was absolutely the reverse of what we should be doing, and that those children needed the most experienced teachers the most, and the practice of removing them from the classroom to do a one-on-one with a paraeducator, and the number of paraeducators that were being brought into the school system was
Outnumbering the teachers.
it really the reverse needed to be true. Those kids needed to be in the regular classroom.
It's
But then
unfortunate.
the teachers have to learn how to manage behaviors
Yeah,
as well.
I don't know what to do, but it's just something that's a continual problem. And
I remember Nancy Chard. Remember Nancy Chard?
absolutely.
Yeah, well, Nancy, when she was chair of education, she said one of the fundamental things we don't have teachers learn in preparing to be teachers is how to manage behaviors so that it's sort of like not escalating. It's the same concept of how you manage those behaviors and self-correct them in a way that doesn't rely on simply removing the kid from the classroom or putting them in the, in some kind of, what is it now? What are they called, Becca, those rooms now? Planning rooms or
Oh, the planning room.
planning?
Planning.
Yeah.
of
Uh-huh.
planning.
Time out, go to the
Uh-huh.
So
planning.
they have more paraeducators and they're given the toughest kids to try to
Yep.
deal with. And they're basically
And not trained.
poorly paid individuals doing their best, and they burn out at a high rate.
Yeah, that was a report that we got a number of years ago, and I don't
meant-
know.
But I meant, wasn't there a report we asked for
There were
to
two-
examine why Vermont had such a high number of kids with IEPs as compared to New Hampshire and other?
Yes,
Well, no,
New England
that was our,
states?
that was our foster care rate, but maybe we have it in schools too. Phil, do you remember?
yeah, there were two reports, one from the DMG group and one from UVM. Those were the basis of redoing the special ed law,
Yeah,
which we've now had to push back a
Okay.
couple of times because the agency isn't doing the professional development. But to Dick's point, what was going on there was a perverse incentive to identify kids as IEP necessary because there was financial rewards to the school under the old fee-for-service system. So now it's gone to a block grant
Get more.
system that's phased in for that reason.
Okay, thank you.
They
Thank-
used to get a lot more money.
So
with
you got a
IEP.
lot more done in education than you think you did.
Well, it's up to Brian now to bring it home because we had to delay it a couple of times, but now they really need to be, once the pandemic is over, they really need to be implemented.
Mhm.
I
Did
think
we
he
get
had
that?
He had a rough
waiting
day
issue,
yesterday. I
Bill?
think.
What's
Oh.
that, Bob?
Did we get the waiting issue done, or is that still sitting over in the
That's a
house?
very sore subject.
Still sitting over in the house.
We
Oh.
shouldn't do the budget until they vote that out.
Well, there's
Bobby,
a,
I want to go home.
yeah, exactly. Me
Oh, you
too.
don't think they voted out?
Well, if I were to hold the budget contingent on a whole lot of votes, we'd never
You
get
know-
out of here.
You know,
And,
we should put pig crates on there too, Bobby.
Say
Yeah,
that Senator Campion has less hair today than he had yesterday over that waiting bill.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
true. He called
Oh.
me last night and he was distraught.
I talked to him as well.
And you're sitting there smiling,
Hard not to.
you know, and we're happy to have you, Philip, but you know.
Yeah.
And I guess from the look on your face, you're not unhappy to be here.
Oh no, believe me, when I get a text from Brian, I always, thank my lucky stars.
you'd have come back to ag rather than stay in there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, sure.
Let's move, folks. We're not going in a good direction here.
No, we're not, but we're just talking about education and historical
Complexity.
knowledge that Senator Bruce brings to the committee.
Indeed, indeed.
So thank you. Now that we've gone down memory lane, and we're congratulating ourselves on having you as a committee member, we're going to move to 502, and that's special ed. That's the formula grants. I think that's,
This is the piece that's stated, these are the statewide piece of the special ed formula for the 40%, the 3.9.
and this is pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Go for that.
Independence Place shall be considered. This is to make sure that that program gets reimbursed for their educational component.
Yep.
Okay. Flexible path.
Is
What?
it still as expensive as ever?
This is their educational component. The residential component is very expensive, Alice, but it's PNMI and it's paid for under Medicaid.
It's all rate set at Alice. But rate setting favors certain programs over others.
Oh, well, I'm not going to go there on a Friday afternoon. I'm going to go on to flexible pathways.
I'll write a report on that.
The change, when you went through the base dollars part of the bill, this is where in flexible pathways, VSAC would like the money to be switched over to them that is transferred because of the timing. And so you would change language here if you're, which I think you're going to do, is take the 41 41,225 ed fund and the 41,225 general fund, and actually just directly appropriate it to VSAC for the stipend for dual enrollment.
Can we, is that permissible that,
Yes.
to do it that way?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it seems like, and I think Tom Little submitted some proposed language to do just that.
And so the only decision you have to make is, do you want to add it to VSAC's main budget line, or do you just want to create a stipend budget line in the budget to make it very clear, because it's a little different than VSAC's normal stuff.
You know, I think since it's coming from the ed fund, we should have a separate line, a
We'll
stipend
do
to
it
make
that
it
way.
clear.
Do it that
Yeah.
way. It'll be very
Yeah.
clear.
That's, well, am I again unanimous in this?
Yeah, I think you're unanimous.
Sounds like you're all alone with it.
All alone
Well,
and
that's
unanimous.
Fine.
Actually, you're all alone on S514 or E514.
What is that one? B? The dual
E514, state teachers retirement system.
How'd you get over there? Oh, yeah,
Thought that was the next one.
Yeah,
504.
done this one yet.
You're way ahead of us in terms of the rest of this.
Well, I knew you were just gonna rubber stamp whatever.
What happened to the numbers in between?
What are you talking about, Alice?
E504, and then we jump to state teachers retirement, which is E514.
Because you may not have language for those other, needed for those other sections.
Okay,
Because this is the language that goes, ties back to different appropriations.
okay.
Am I right on that, Stephanie?
You are right on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so that's why the numbers have to relate back to the appropriation in the other section.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, so we've got dual enrollment. And that's the 41,000 that we're dealing with that we just
So-
talked about.
Yeah, so the main part of dual enrollment, the cost of dual enrollment would remain. It's just the
Yeah.
stipend piece that would
Right.
be.
Okay.
Same thing for the general fund side of it, in subsection C.
And then
Stephanie?
the,
Oops, sorry.
Let's go
Quick
ahead,
question
Phil.
for Stephanie. Is budget adjustment used to true up the dual enrollment?
I don't know that it's often in budget adjustment that it's trued up. We, if there's pressure, trend line pressure, it's usually trued up in the next budget,
Okay,
the need. If
Okay.
you're, hearing that there's, cost pressure either in, because the in dual enrollment and also the cap, I think we've taken it off now in statute on the early college piece. I think that's.
Yep.
That's,
So-
but it's usually in the budget cycle, less than the budget adjustment cycle.
but in other words, it's an entitlement and we pay whatever
Yeah.
it winds up being.
Bill.
Well, the second half of the year's money would go out in January, so it would be
Yeah.
it would be too clunky to be able to.
Okay,
all right, so now we're on virtual high school, Vermont Virtual High School. I didn't remember we had one, but I guess we do. Secondary
Where
school.
is that?
That's at the top of 158.
No, I mean, where's the virtual high school?
Well, it's virtual.
Jeez.
I said, I don't know what it is. Philip, can you tell us?
Yeah,
Virtual
where
high
is the
school?
virtual high school?
I think that's the provider of online classes. So that, different districts can send students
Oh,
to,
so take advantage of a course in another school?
online
Okay.
credits.
Oh.
Okay. All right, thank you. It's hard to remember all this level of detail. You have to memorize all of state government and then some. Secondary school reform grants, that's been in there right along.
In the flexible pathways line, yes.
Yeah, and Academy of Science and Technology and
Early college.
2.5 for early college.
Yep, that's all good.
Okay. Yeah, this is all part of flexible pathways, which we know when we were looking at what we moved to the ed, what was clearly in the ed fund when we changed the revenue streams, this was all part of that delineation. Okay, teachers' retirement, and that's the normal retirement, and that reflects the ADEC, is that right? I mean, the annual.
Yes, yeah, this is the revised, updated recommendation.
Okay,
So is this, if the language from the House, is this where that would drop in?
You would probably, if you were going to be, you have the $150 million general fund reserve in the, what's called the D part of the bill, because it's having to do with money, and you could put it either here or with the 150, it's a choice of where you want to place. If you're migrating language around teachers' retirement, but I think you might want to put it in the D section, because I think the retirement is going to look both at state employees and teachers issues combined, not just teacher. We're just in teacher side here.
Okay.
and this shows, and you can see, anybody who's listening is on B, it shows the annual contribution of 38.9 million. It's a normal contribution. So that is the normal contribution out of the ed fund. And 157 is but that's not ed fund.
None of this is ed fund.
The normal retirement is.
Oh, yes, the normal pieces, but the A part.
Yes. Stephanie, I thought I was going to lose my mind there for a minute.
I know.
Huh?
The normal retirement is ed fund. In the OPEB, in E515 right now, this is all entirely general fund.
General fund. All right, E515. This is
the OPEB piece.
yes. And this is the discussion that we want to have, and that is the normal cost of OPEB.
Yeah.
Just like the normal cost of the actual cash pension payment for current teachers when they retire. Our discussion has been, should we propose to make that an ed fund cost the same as the pension? It's part of that retirement package. One is healthcare, and one is the financial assistance for when the teachers who are currently employed retire. Our thinking was to do what we did with the normal teachers' retirement, and that is to put that in as an ed fund expense, move the general fund a couple of sources equal to that cost.
Well,
and
that's a different, because OPEB right now is a pay-go, that's probably not, that you're not going to reduce your pay-go by that. So that's less of an option.
No, I'm just talking about the normal, the 14 million.
But I'm talking about the swapping of general fund in is probably a harder thing to do, because you wouldn't be losing it would cost you an equal amount in general fund. You would have to find, it's a different structure than we originally thought.
Oh, it is?
You can't, because you're not actually, there's not a normal cost within the pay-go. The normal cost is in a structure of a, pre-funding. So
yeah.
So what we would do is establish a pre-funding with the normal cost.
All right. Well, however we do it, it would take the normal cost and start recognizing that future cost for when the teacher who's working today retires and is going to be given that healthcare benefit, which really needs to be addressed. So however we frame it, we have talked about that as something that should be done, and make that similar to what we've done with pensions.
Yes.
So
when they retire, because they're too young to draw Medicare, but when they do get to the age of
You have to-
Medicare, then they switch over to
Medicare
Medicare?
is always the payer of first resort, I think.
They do have to, when they age
Yeah.
into Medicare, they have to sign up for Medicare. There is the retirement benefit helps pay the Medicare premium and
Supplement.
costs. So there's that, but yeah, if they retire before Medicare age, part of what you see in the OPEB cost is the cost of their
Yeah.
healthcare.
That's why if this administration succeeds in moving Medicare age down, it would have a very beneficial impact, but until that happens, so we had talked about this construct and how to do it. And we won't do it this afternoon, but if we will come back to it, but it's really a question of an expenditure right now. It really never has been officially addressed. It has been kind of an orphan expenditure. It was originally paid for out of the corpus of the pension fund.
It's gonna be free.
But that only compounded the underfunding for that. And so we really need to, at some point, make a decision in terms of understanding that future cost. So when Senator Ballant retires from her academic career, that the cost of her health care, if she retires at 62, we would recognize and have anticipated that cost.
You might change that law if she won't let her retire till she's.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're talking.
Well, considering how the demographics, and Rich Westman sent us an interesting from what it was, Social Security, I think, or was from the federal government. That's part of our problem, of course, is the demographics and the longevity. And the fact is, gender does play a role because women tend to right now still live longer, and teachers by definition are come with a higher education. And so educational levels, socioeconomic factors and gender do make teachers more costly as a group.
But
So-
I agree that their healthcare should be paid for by the education.
Okay.
I agree with the future cost of it. What it would be helpful to me is we go through here, what remains in the ed fund, what is in the ed fund, what remains a general fund expense.
Well,
Yeah.
the general fund expense is going to be the underfunding.
Yeah.
Right.
Right now, even though we paid the ADEC in full, all the risk, if the ADEC proves to be insufficient based on actual experience, the underfunding, if the demographics are wrong or the return on investments isn't as high, all of that underfunding that's generated from the ADEC being set too low all falls to the employer, namely the state.
So in E514, the 189 million is a general fund expense.
Yes, you see that back in here, back in the B1514.
Yeah,
So
you're right.
in A, that's a general fund expense.
Let me just go to it. I want to make sure I'm just saying that right, because we're I just want to get to the B514. Here. So in the retirement system, no, the general fund expense is the 152, the 37 is the ed fund expense. That's, and the total is 189 for retirement. This is for pension, not OPEB.
Can you give us those numbers? Can you give us?
Where am I looking at that, Stephanie?
You're looking at E514 in A.
Yes,
Yeah.
and can you give us that division of that number again, please?
The 189 is the total,
Yeah.
37.6 is ed fund,
And the
and
38.
152 million is general fund. The 152 last year was 119. and the 37 was just under $7 million last year.
Yeah. No, it was,
And the-
I thought it was like 7.1.
It looks like it's 6.9.
Oh, okay. Interestingly enough, the ARC for teachers' retirement in fiscal year 2013 was $11 million. I never have been able to figure out why it went down by, that's a big dip from 11 to 7.
So why wouldn't we put in here that request to have it move from the 5-year check on it down
Because
to?
that's going to go in the other
That's-
section, Alice.
Oh,
And
okay.
that applies to both retirement systems, state employees and teachers.
Okay, good. Mhm. Very good.
You
So
see,
Yeah,
how
you can accrue an awful lot of underfunding if you
Yeah.
wait 5 years. And that's why we got hit with that huge, for teachers' retirement, $379 million, which was, driven half by, 42%, I think, by demographics and the rest by investment returns. So that would go in that section because that really applies to all the pension funds. So I'm going to
Okay.
move along because we've got more work to do there, but I think we are in agreement, at least for the current, for that pre-funding. Is that how we would phrase? That's what,
Or we'd start in the path to pre-funding.
yeah.
We
Uh-huh.
probably wouldn't
Okay.
establish a full pre-funding in the
Yeah,
in the
okay.
budget, but
So,
Yeah.
and then let's go to 515. This
Uh,
is what we've been talking about.
well, that's where we're OPEB. So the
Yeah.
pension system is already it's an actuarially determined system.
Yeah. I know.
And OPEB right now it's a pay-go, and what we would be adding is a sort of a first step to pre-funding.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get some language to do exactly what we've
Chris
been
Roop has been
talking
working
about.
on that. And he's got a white paper together and some things that we'll go over with you
Okay.
over the weekend or Monday to.
All right, okay, thank you. Higher education.
Madam Chair,
Oh, it's 3:00.
yeah, I was wondering if I did make a couple of appointments for 3 to 4 because you had said we
Yeah,
would,
no, I'm sorry, I realize it's 3:05 and I'm gonna stop here.
Okay. And
Okay,
I'll be ready on the higher education side, not only the language, but the numbers on Tuesday or
okay.
Monday. Are we in on Monday?
Well, I think, considering what we have left to do, and Senator Ballin is off, I'm a little confused on time frame, but I thought we were gonna,
she said they were talking about doing an extra week or something.
I know, so I need to, I don't know whether Senator Ballin.
Well, I'm-
Stephanie, how much more do we have?
You don't have very much more. You have the Pay Act piece in the back. You have a little, the higher ed piece here is sort of the longest piece of language. There's a lot, that goes with the state college money in language here. And then there's also the workforce pieces in the state colleges that are language here. And then there's a little bit language in the natural resources arena. There's not really much other language. It's very quick stuff to go through. For the
Okay,
rest
so
of
my
the-
question is, should we plan on coming in Monday afternoon?
I think it might be
Well-
helpful. We could sort of
Yeah.
go back and close out things that were questions on Monday.
I think that would be helpful
and
because
sort
I
of
hate to
organize how
put
you
so
want to
much,
do them.
I hate to really put ourselves against the wall later in the week. So since Senator Sears doesn't have to commute,
I can't come in Monday, I'm sorry.
you
Yeah.
can't come in?
Not Monday afternoon. I have a wake to attend down in Townsend, Mass on Monday afternoon
See,
All
and
right.
at
I-
4
I-
o'clock.
we-
So
Could we do in the morning from 10 to noon?
I
I
can't,
could
I've
do
got
that.
well, I'd have to bail on a board meeting. I've got a board meeting from 10 to noon.
I can come either time.
Okay,
And I have to take my brother fly back to Florida for 5 o'clock fly out. So he's got to be there at least by
Well, let me see if we would have a quorum if I don't make the board meeting. And we can send out confirmation that we would meet, at 10?
Yeah, I'm fine
Yeah.
with that.
I'd be
Okay.
good with that.
Okay,
And I could at least be with you until noon or something.
okay.
Yeah, well, you and I are both in the same boat, Bobby. We can't do Monday afternoon.
Okay, I'll look for an email on that.
Right, all right.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
That
Okay.
sounds good.
Because we still have the whole ARPA section. Our plan is to do a whole consolidated list of the ARPA funding. So we'll send out a notice
Oh, Jesus.
if I can make it work to meet at 10. If we can't, I'm gonna have a problem with a quorum, I guess. Or no, maybe I won't.
Just Dick and I'll be gone.
So it would be the higher ed piece. It's part of it. All right.
Mm.
Okay.
Well, we may do it because some of this stuff, actually, if we can get it moved, and then we can review it quickly. Sometimes there are pieces that can move pretty well with a smaller committee,
Sure.
as
I
long
mean-
as I've got a quorum.
I'm not gonna argue with your decision.
Okay.
You may have some bills too that are out of committee today that maybe are, hopefully some bills that maybe we can do a first
I
look
don't-
at or something.
I don't know. I don't know if we have any sense of bills that have come out. So we'll send out a confirmation on Monday on the timing. And so right now, afternoons are not workable for Senator Starr and Senator Sears. But other people could make Monday afternoon. Okay.
Yep.
And we don't have Senator Ballant on, but we would have at least four of us, and that would be a quorum, so we'd be all set. Okay.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to suggest, because Philip has to leave, that we adjourn for this week, and we will send out a notice confirming the time that we meet on Monday. It would either be 10 or it would be 1 o'clock.
And anyone listening, I'll be sure to post to our agenda so people can keep an eye out on our website on our agenda.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah,
Well,
we would.